Hello everyone, and thank you for taking time to watch these videos. As you know, these videos are a continuation or a furthering of ideas or even some new ideas around the teaching that I gave on the previous Sunday. Over the last 7 weeks, we've been dealing with the teaching series or the subject matter of becoming aware. And in this series of teachings, I have put forward this idea that the more we are aware of ourselves, actually the greater awareness we have of God. And that the more awareness we have of Him, the greater awareness we have of Him, the more awareness we have of ourselves. So it's this circular pattern that we benefit from because we become more aware. Now, last week was the last teaching in the series of 7, where I dealt with this idea that I put forward, this very key idea that if we don't grapple with this idea, if we don't wrestle with it and we don't do some deep thinking around it, that everything else is irrelevant. And the thought that I put forward might have been a little shocking, it might have been a little hard to hear. If so, it actually made its point then. But the key thought that I put forward was this, is that we are all addicts. You know, as a kid growing up, I used to hear sermons and Sunday school lessons and used to hear talk about that we were all born with a vacuum inside of us or a hole inside of us that only God could fill. And to be honest with you, I really couldn't wrap my mind around what that actually meant. And it wasn't until many years later as a pastor that I began to understand what those phrases meant and why I shifted the phrase to language that we could all understand. You know, I was a pastor working with people in addiction. I was working in addiction ministries. I was doing a lot of counseling around addiction and of all forms and all different shapes and sizes. And really in that time of ministry began to understand what it meant by a hole in us or a vacuum in us. And I really began to take seriously the language that was introduced in the Psalms and other places in Scripture and really began to do a lot of thought around that. And I came to the conclusion that instead of saying there's a hole inside of us or a vacuum inside of us, actually I shifted my thinking around the fact that we were actually all born addicts. And I believe that this is a universal truth, that all of us are born looking for something outside of ourselves to bring us peace, to bring us joy, to bring us hope, to fulfill us, bring us meaning, to bring us purpose. And we were all born this way. And it's in that being born and understanding this idea of addiction and the idea of having a vacuum and a hole inside of us, I began really to become aware more aware of this idea that we needed to be in relationship with Jesus because He is the only thing that can fill that. He's the only thing that can bring, the only person that can bring us joy and hope and fulfillment and peace and meaning and purpose in our lives. And where this idea of addiction goes wrongly is when we begin to focus on the roles that we play or the jobs that we have or the substances we use or the relationships we're in. The list could go on and on about what possible addictions, what possibilities of addictions are. But I know this, I know a lot of times we tend to focus in those areas, and what happens is when we focus in those areas, they're never enough. They never bring us the filling that we're looking for. They never bring us the meaning and the purpose that we're looking for. There's always something, I think, that's left in that's left vacant, and it causes us to become more consumeristic of those things. Hence, those addictions or those things become unhealthy addictions in our lives. See, I believe this to my core. I do believe that we're all addicts. I think when you look at Scripture, there's clear language that talks about longing and seeking and looking forward to and when can I, this deep longing for something outside of ourselves. And I honestly believe, my friends, that we were created to long and seek and have a need and desire for something outside of ourselves, and that something outside of ourselves is actually Jesus. Because he is the truth, he is the way, he is the hope, he is the peace, he is the joy. He's the one that brings meaning and purpose into all the chaos that we have around us. And so we were created for that relationship, and that's the only thing that can fill us. You know, Jesus was talking to this lady out beside a well. She was drawing water, and Jesus asked her for water, and she had a conversation with him, and Jesus drops this bomb on her. He says, you know, drinking that water right there, you will always be thirsty afterwards. You're going to want more. But when you drink from the water that I give, you will never be thirsty again. And then she immediately says, well, I want that. And I think that is a real lesson for all of us right now, is that all of these other things that we try to put in place inside of us that would fill this gap or this space or this vacuum inside of us, that those things never work. We always want more. We're always longing for more. We become thirsty again. And those things left unchecked, because they're not all bad things. Some of them can actually be really good things that, if left unchecked, they can take us into deep and dark places. And I talked about this a little bit on Sunday, that when we tend to put people in those roles, so I'm looking at maybe my spouse or a family member or a coworker or another type of personality, and I look to those people that actually be the one who fills that void inside of us, we've actually set them up for perpetual failure, and we've set ourselves up for being perpetually let down, because that person can never fill that space. But yet, how often have we done this, say, with our spouses or our children, or with our coworkers, or our friends, or the person we're dating, or the person that we're engaged in friendship with? It's just never enough. And that's why I believe with all of my heart that we were created, yes, for relationship, for this idea of longing and seeking and searching, but it's actually in the person of Jesus that we become more filled. The thirst tends to go away, and we begin to understand the importance of a relationship with Jesus, because he is the one that does actually give us meaning and purpose and fulfillment. So my brothers and my sisters, with this truth, I think it's really important for us to sit back and to look at the relationships that we're in, especially. Are the relationships that we're in, are we finding ourselves unfulfilled? Are we finding ourselves finding maybe lack of meaning or purpose in those relationships? Are those relationships hard, and are they tough because you always feel like maybe you're giving but not getting anything in return? Or maybe you find the opposite is true, that you're always taking and not giving much in return. My friends, I think that this is important for us to think about, because maybe, just maybe, we've actually set that relationship up in our lives for constant failure, because we have expectations that person cannot fulfill, because they're not Jesus. Jesus is the only person that can give us the things that we're looking for. And yes, he will bring other people into our lives and other situations into our lives that he will work through in order to help us feel that sense of purpose and fulfillment and meaning and hope and joy and peace and all of those things that we all desperately want. But my brothers and my sisters, I really want us to think about the fact that we need to focus upon Jesus in this. You know, sometimes, a lot of times, working with the idea of addiction, you know, we've turned to substances to dull us, to dull that pain of being continually let down, continually frustrated, continually angry. And we find at the end of those, and you already know this, if you struggle in this area, that at the end of that, you're always more down, more depressed, angrier, more frustrated. And so I just want to encourage you that maybe you need to reach out for some help. Maybe you need to talk to someone. You can feel free to talk to me. You can contact me at shane@dalhouseychurch.com, and we can talk through this and how to shift maybe our focus away from those things and how to shift our focus towards Jesus so that these things have less control over us, because this truth will set us free. So I would like for you to take time to think through these deep concepts. And I also want to say this: in the upcoming weeks, we're going to launch into a new teaching series. And this teaching series is actually called Love Requires an Exploration Through the Enneagram. Now, I know a lot of you have already taken personality tests and all of those things. But one of the things about the Enneagram that's much different than the other personality tests is that the Enneagram is not static. It's not fixed. And when you take a look at the Enneagram, and when you take the test, maybe at the Enneagram Institute is the one I highly recommend. When you go there and you take the test, you're going to realize what your personality is, yes. But you're also going to realize when you're functioning really well, what that looks like. And then you're going to find out when I'm not functioning well, what does that look like? And then you begin to understand other people's personality types. But the key difference with the Enneagram versus other personality tests is that in the Enneagram, you begin to learn that I can start off functioning really well in the beginning of the day, and I'm functioning really badly at the end of the day. And what does that look like? So it's not static. So I want to encourage you to tune in for that teaching beginning this Sunday. You can go to the Enneagram Institute and take the test online, and then you can listen and watch the interactions with Pastor Brennan and I as we talk through and work through the Enneagram through the prism of what does love require for us. So my brothers and my sisters, my friends, I'm asking you to take time to join in on this new series so that the awareness of yourself can become even greater and the awareness of God can become even greater. Thank you for taking time to watch these videos. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that you're finding them helpful and meaningful. I hope that you will take time to think through these areas, through these questions, through these deep truths. In closing, I want to say that I'm praying that you will find peace and joy in the person of Jesus. God bless.